Stalemate over the Strait of Hormuz continues as the war with Iran stretches further into its 6th month. President Trump yesterday again insisted the United States has control over the key waterway, posting on Truth Social, quote, "I think we will keep it," before touting the American naval blockade of Iranian ports and adding, quote, "Praise be to Allah." The president's insistence comes despite Iranian claims otherwise and little traffic moving through the strait. The International Energy Agency yesterday warned that the reopening of the waterway is becoming more and more urgent as oil stockpiles are depleting at a rapid pace. U.S. gas prices, meanwhile, climbed to a national average of $4.03 per gallon yesterday. That marks a record high level for this point in the calendar year. Joining us now, White House reporter for Politico, Maya Ward. Maya, so when we see these gas prices at a record high for this specific time of year, do you think that that's raising any alarms in the White House?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's been raising alarms for months, and Republicans privately expressing their concerns that, okay, this needs to be wrapped up by X date. I mean, we've been writing about this now for several months, and one timeline was Memorial Day, and then it was this summer, and now we're talking about Labor Day, and Republicans are still out there publicly saying the president's, on the brink of a resolution here, and this is going to be wrapped up, and we want to talk about all of these other things that we want to get in front of voters ahead of midterms. But the reality is voters are concerned about affordability. They're concerned about gas prices. It's right in front of their faces, and Republicans are privately, just talking to my sources, starting to have to accept this reality that the president is running out of time and that there's, not much road left to get this wrapped up before midterms to see that impact. And so there's this growing acceptance that this is going to be the status quo, which is not ideal, but to say the least, from a messaging perspective.
Right. I remember Republicans telling me that their Memorial Day wish was that this would be all wrapped up so that they could have some time before the midterms to message around gas prices and the economy. Meanwhile, the president is saying that he is, quote, low-keying the entire approach to the war, focusing on economic pressure over a military approach. Is this going to work? What are you hearing from the White House?
Yeah, I mean, just talking to my sources about this in recent weeks, the president's stuck, right? I mean, Iran wants control over the strait, which is not an option that the White House is willing to accept. Now you see the president saying that he's low-keying it, that it's going to be economic pressure instead of military pressure. But we've seen that kind of fragile pause in fighting unravel so many times at this point. We see it then spiral into this tit for tat for strikes again. And that's also not a great option 3 months out from midterms, because there's that risk of a wider war and fueling even the gas prices even further. So the president doesn't have a ton of options. Everything we've been hearing is that the White House is frustrated with that. Everyone wants to wrap this up. But instead, now the president is trying this other approach with the risk, again, is this going to spiral into additional strikes?
A larger war, or if he pulls out and the situation is worse than it was when we entered the war, which is the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian control. But Maya, there's also this. We're learning new details about President Trump's secret plane switch in Turkey at last month's NATO meeting due to a credible threat from Iran. The Washington Post reports that U.S. intelligence officials were skeptical of the Iranian assassination threat against President Trump. That's according to current and former U.S. officials familiar with the intelligence. One of those officials said the assassination threat was relayed by the Israeli government to the CIA, where analysts did not view the intelligence as compelling and conveyed that skepticism to Trump administration officials. Another official called reports of threats against Trump's life, quote, Israeli-derived, not U.S.-generated, and viewed as low confidence. MS Now has learned Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent were both aware Trump was on a secret plane, but stayed on the Legacy Air Force One. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was the only cabinet secretary on the smaller military plane with Trump. The White House did not directly answer questions about the intelligence the U.S. received or how it was perceived by U.S. officials. The CIA declined to comment, and the Israeli embassy in Washington did not immediately respond to a request for details. So, Maya, when you look at all of this and what's happening, I mean, the fact that cabinet members were split up, our reporting from my colleague Jake Traylor is that Bessent and Rubio were aware that they were on the decoy plane. What do you make of all of this? And also the fact that there are CIA officials telling, at least the Washington Post, that this threat was not that serious.
Yeah, I mean, the way that the White House has handled this and the fact that we learned of this plane swap in the media weeks after it actually occurred, I mean, has only led to them now having to answer more questions and about their decision, about why it was decided for who to be on what plane. Now we have members of Congress asking for a briefing, which is only going to add to more questions. We have questions about the intelligence and also just questions about the decision around the lack of transparency. And I was thinking about, this is not the first time a White House has had to deal with a security threat or a president traveling to a place that they see as risky. And I mean, we both covered Biden and we saw him take that trip to Kiev in 2023. And the White House press pool has long respected these security concerns. And there have been ways that White Houses have navigated that. I mean, under the Biden administration, we saw that trip happen. We didn't know he was traveling, but there was a small press pool. I believe it was just one reporter, one photographer. And they discussed those rules with the White House beforehand. Then we got all the information after as to why this was done. Here's what that trip looked like. Here are all the details. And so we also saw this happen in Trump 1. We saw this happen under the Obama administration. So the way that they decided to handle this and to not, even when Trump landed back in the U.S. and there was no longer a security threat, has just raised a ton more questions.
Right. There are a lot of questions that they still haven't answered, and the fact that they denied a lot of the reporting initially. But there's one more story I want to ask you about, Maya. The youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history, Caroline Leavitt, is stepping down from her role at the end of this month. President Trump made the announcement yesterday on social media, saying Leavitt is leaving to spend more time with her family, but will become one of his top outside advisors and a, quote, influential voice within the Republican Party. Leavitt has held the job since Trump returned to office for the second time and has been one of the president's fiercest defenders. Her departure was announced less than a month after she returned to the White House after having been on maternity leave for the birth of her daughter in May. In a statement of her own, Leavitt thanked Trump for, quote, so many extraordinary opportunities. So still going to be an outside advisor, as we laid out, and as you know, she is one of his biggest defenders, has even lied from the podium about some of the stuff that the White House has done in order to defend the president. What do you make of this change?
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely not going anywhere. She's going to continue to be a key surrogate and, as you said, an advisor to the president. I think the question is who's going to fill that void in the White House. Is one of the most visible defenders of the president. When she was out on leave this spring, there wasn't like one person who was there as that messenger. They had this kind of rotating cast of characters, including cabinet secretaries. Vance did a press briefing. Rubio, I mean, the memes have, already started about him taking the job. But it'll be interesting to see, do they elevate someone internally, or do they decide with this timing, less than 90 days from midterms, that they want to bring someone in from the outside who can, whoever they feel is going to be the best to kind of meet this moment in the run up to midterms.
Yeah, there are so many names floating around right now who could possibly replace her, or maybe they just decide they're not going to have as many press briefings, which the first Trump administration has done that before. White House reporter for Politico, Maya Ward, thank you.